starting with Russia and Ukraine. It's a new year, but not much has changed for Russia or Ukraine. Both sides continue to trade blows in the battle as well as on diplomacy. In Kiev, the air raid sirens sounded just ahead of the new year. These were air raid sirens you heard, which were blaring just before the clock struck 12 midnight in Kiev. Much of the city spent the moment in darkness as power shortages continue to cripple much of life in the capital and other areas. In his New Year address to the nation, President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country is 10% away from a deal to end the war with Russia, but cautioned that the most important issues remained unresolved. Zelensky said he would not sign a weak peace agreement that would only prolong the war.
What does Ukraine want? Peace? Yes. At any cost? No. We want the end of the war, not the end of Ukraine. Are we tired? Extremely. Does that mean we are ready to surrender? Those who think so are deeply mistaken.
Zelensky also had a clear message for Europe. Ukraine is the only shield that separates Europe's way of life from the Russian world.
І ми маємо повне право сьогодні казати: Україна – це насправді єдиний щит, який зараз відділяє комфортне європейське життя від руського міра. І у більшості лідерів не виникає питання, навіщо підтримувати Україну, бо якщо, не дай Боже, Україна впаде, будуть наступні питання. Навіщо підтримувати Польщу? І хто воюватиме за держави Балтії? І що робити без України в НАТО? Україна потрібна Європі, а Європа – Україні.
In his annual New Year's address, Putin rallied his troops fighting in Ukraine, saying he believed in them and in victory in the war. He paid tribute in particular to his forces fighting in Ukraine, calling them heroes.
You have taken on the responsibility to fight for your native land, for truth and justice. Millions of people across Russia, I assure you, are with you on this New Year's Eve. They are thinking of you, empathizing with you, hoping for you. We are united in our sincere, selfless, and devoted love for Russia. I congratulate all our soldiers and commanders on the coming new year. We believe in you and our victory.
Moscow's mayor claimed that several Ukrainian long-range drones were intercepted as they headed towards the Russian capital on New Year's Eve. Russia and Ukraine have been trading blame on sabotaging talks after Moscow claimed that Kiev's drones attacked Putin's official house in Novgorod region. Now, a US media report has claimed that US intelligence found no evidence of any alleged drone attack on Putin's residence. The report claimed that conclusion is supported by a CIA assessment. In another interesting development, US President Trump shared a post of an article that accused Putin of hindering the peace process. Trump reposted the editorial from New York Post on his Truth Social platform, and the headline said, "Putin attack bluster shows Russia is the one standing in the way of peace." Now, meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has said that President Trump's advisors held talks with Zelensky and national security advisors from the UK, France and Germany to discuss the next steps in ending Russia's war in Ukraine. All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined by Anne Elizabeth from Paris. She is a columnist at the London Telegraph. And a little later, I'll also be joined by a guest who's joining us from Moscow. He's Dr. Umit Hazir, political scientist. And let me start with you. As far as Ukraine's statement, Zelensky's statement regarding Ukraine is concerned, he suggests that Ukraine is the shield between Europe and Russia and the Russian way of life. Zelensky says they're a proxy shield for Europe's comfort. After Ukraine, is Poland and rest of Europe next? How do you see it? Where does Russia plan to stop?
If Ukraine should sort of yield, which has been sort of in the beginning mooted by several of President Trump's advisors, the door is open for more attacks. You must have noticed that drones and fighter jets, Russian drones and Russian fighter jets have started flying over countries in the Baltics and in Poland. And we know the story of Russian aggression. When rewarded, it always follows with more aggression. We know that after Georgia, you had Abkhazia. After Abkhazia, you had Moldova. And then you had Ukraine, and this is a very terrible but very familiar Russian pattern. The Russians came in first in 2014. Never forget that they were unprompted and they invaded four eastern oblasts of Ukraine and Crimea, which had been decided, which was part of Ukraine and which voted in favor of Ukraine being part of Ukrainian independence in the 1991 referendum when the Soviet Union broke up. It was an aggression that was started by Russia. Russia said it's a military operation. It's not a war. Now he says it's a war. It's 3.5 years later. It's 1,444 days. And the Russians have moved perhaps 1% towards more and more, 1% more of Ukrainian territory than they have before. So he's now talking about something that he refused to call a war for a long time, but he is the aggressor. The Ukrainians were not attacking him.
Understood. And stay with me. Now let me cut across to Moscow, where Dr. Umit Hazir is joining us. Dr. Umit, Anne, whom I just spoke with, she points out at a trend, a Russian trend. She mentioned Georgia, she mentioned Moldova. Dr. Umit, can you hear me?
Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I cannot see anything on the screen. I hope you can see me.
All right. We can, if you can hear me, we can see you clearly. I'll just repeat, what the discussion I just had with Anne.
Yes.
She mentioned that there is a trend when it comes to the Russians, where it was Georgia, Moldova, then Ukraine, of course. And then more recently, we've started seeing Russian drones even in the Baltic states. Is Putin attempting to go past Ukraine? Where does he plan to stop? And this is coming in the backdrop of the comment which came from Zelensky saying that Ukraine is the shield between Europe and Russia. How far does Russia want to go, given the trend that Anne has just pointed out?
You know that Ukraine is considered by Russia as to be, especially in world politics, an ontological issue for Russia, because if Russia will be succeed in Ukraine or at least achieve its targets, and then it will return to other post-Soviet space, because Russia considers Ukraine as Russia will be empire or not. After this war will be ended, according to the results of the war and according to what Russia achieved in this war, it will determine the Russian empire will be established or not. That's why if Russia will be successful in the Ukrainian war, Russia will return its hinterland, like in the post-Soviet space, and it will be more effective and dominant. That's why it is directly related to the security of Europe and other post-Soviet countries.
And let me now come back to you. You've heard what Dr. Umit just said. He said it'll depend on the outcome of what comes out of Ukraine. And that kind of also leads me to my next question. What is the definition of a victory in the war? As Putin said, he believes in victory in the war. What is Putin's definition of that? And if you can just continue and thread it with what you just heard from Dr. Umit.
Well, first of all, I'm fascinated that Dr. Umit is saying that Russia is entitled to an empire. I'm sure at one stage the British Empire believed that it was eternal, but it isn't, and there are lots of free nations that came out of it. There's no reason because Russia wants something and Mr. Putin wants something. I'm not sure his country wants something, but certainly Mr. Putin wants something. But there's no reason to give it to him, especially if it ends up with so many deaths and devastation. The Russians are now complaining bitterly because Ukraine has started attacking inside the borders of Ukraine. I think that Ukraine, which has now probably the best army in Europe in terms of experience, in terms of tactical prowess, in terms of capacity for intelligence, there's no reason why they should have bombs and missiles, Iranian-built missiles and Chinese electronic missiles, missiles containing Chinese electronics. And why should the Ukraine not hit back? The Ukrainians have been very careful not to hit back at anything else than military and strategic objectives, such as energy reserves and pipelines and factories, and of course, air bases from where planes go and bomb Ukraine. But Russia is not entitled to this. Ukraine, the Soviet Union was disbanded. Various countries gained independence. I can tell you that I spoke with Kazakhs recently, and the Kazakhs said if Russia is allowed, and that's not just Europe, that's anybody who has the unhappiness of sharing a border with Ukraine. The Kazakhs say, if Ukraine is conquered by Russia, we are next. And the Kazakhs, this is not very well known, share a bitter experience with the Ukrainians. You know about the Ukrainian Holodomor, the great famine organized by Stalin in the 30s. Well, the same thing happened in Kazakhstan between 31 and 33. 38% of the Kazakh population died of hunger in the steppe. And so people who are the neighbors of Russia know exactly what Russia can do to them, and they don't want it to happen.
And now let me go over to Dr. Umit once again. Dr. Umit, and has mentioned that Ukraine has only been attacking military infrastructure. Well, that's highly questionable regarding the kind of reports that have also come out from the areas which have been targeted in Russia. But when you talk about the Russian Empire, can you explain to us what you mean?
Actually, it has a historical dimension. Since the Peter II, Russia has considered itself as an empire. If we cannot be empire, if we cannot, they consider, according to their view, if we cannot establish an empire, we cannot exist. So we cannot turn into nation states. That's why it's actually Ukraine is a turning point because, for instance, most probably you know Alexander Dugin. He said recently that in order to establish Russian Empire, the Ukrainian state must be destroyed. So, especially Ukraine is a very important country for targets of imperial aims or imperial goals of Russia, because if Russia cannot be hegemon over Ukraine, it will be not possible for Russia to establish hegemony in other post-Soviet countries. That's why considering Ukraine very seriously. And for another thing, it is also important in terms of some ideologies, Eurasianism and Slavism, and Pan-Slavism also. It's also a historical ideology. In order to this ideology satisfy, Russia wants to achieve its targets in Ukraine. I also would like to underline one more thing. There is a concept, foreign policy concept of Russia, which calls Ruski Mir.
Dr. Umit,
so according to this...
yeah, Dr. Umit, I'm just coming in there. You're saying that for Russia to exist, it needs to become a Russian empire, and for that, the destruction of Ukraine, these are your words, is necessary. That means they do not plan to stop at the eastern regions of Ukraine. Entire Ukraine is within ambition?
Yes, because Russia will continue this war until it will achieve its targets. For another thing, geopolitical interests are more important than economic interests for Russia. That's why even though many sanctions imposed on Russia, Russia still continues this war because Russia considers geopolitical interests and historical aims, which are much more important than economic interest. And as far as I already mentioned, there is a Ruski Mir concept of Russia, which is also a Russian word. Russia would like to establish kind of empire and include
I hear your point.
Russian people or Russian-speaking people in other countries, such as Ukraine, already mentioned in Kazakhstan.
I hear your point, Dr.
So
Omid.
it is one of the...
I hear your point, and you've not minced your words. Ukraine...
It is one of the elements of Russian foreign policy because...
No, I hear your point. You're not mincing your words.
Tell me,
The
please,
destruction
because...
of Ukraine, you made it very clear, and that only goes in line with what Zelensky is saying, that Ukraine is the last shield between Europe and Russia. We will leave it here for now, because these are rather contrasting views, and we'll need to wait and watch what really happens on the front lines. But from what I gauge from your response, a peace is necessary at the earliest, if it wasn't early enough before this as well. Thank you so much to both our guests. The matter is rather concerning. We will be continuing to track, as we always do at WION World is One, all the developments coming in from Russia, Ukraine. Anne and Dr. Omid, thanks so much for joining us.